Things have gone from bad to worse for the Atlanta Falcons. They're 3-7 and, excuse me, horribly inconsistent. Michael Penix Jr. aggravated a bone bruise in his left knee during Sunday's overtime loss to the Carolina Panthers. There is concern that Penix could miss the rest of the season. He had 2 ACL tears in his right knee in college. This is a left knee issue. Reportedly, the ACL is impacted. Not good. Not good for the Falcons. They do have Kirk Cousins. They didn't trade him. It never materialized. There was never even any serious discussion that anyone was going to trade for Kirk Cousins. They're paying him $90 million between last year and this year, and they owe him another $10 million next year. Looks like he'll be the guy the rest of the way. And, you know, I think when you look at all the good teams in the NFC, I think 3-7, you just run the table, there's no guarantee you're getting in. They've got no margin for error if they want to have a chance to get to the postseason. It just feels like the season's lost for the Falcons, Devin.
Yeah, and I think the games we've watched of this team, like it seems like the Buffalo Bills Monday night game, we were like, okay, like they finally turned the corner, and then you're reminded of the Carolina Panthers game where they just laid the egg. Then they're up late in the game last week to Carolina again, and they lose. The team is just so inconsistent that you just have no idea what you're going to get. And I think the hard thing for Raheem Morris now is, like, I think people look at the Falcons and they're like, okay, they got Jeff Albrecht. Their defense looked like it got better. They draft these 2 first-round picks up front. They're rushing the passer better. Okay, check. The defense has gotten better. Then you look at the offense and you're like, man, you got Bijan Robinson. You got Drake London. You got some weapons there. Like, why can't this team just be somewhat competitive? Like, how are the Carolina Panthers in position to compete with the Tampa Bay Bucks for this division? And the Falcons are, I mean, like you just said, it feels like they have no shot. And I get nervous for Raheem Morris. And now with, Penix possibly done for the year, even if you kind of turn it around and Kirk Cousins goes and he plays well, does Arthur Blank walk away from the season encouraged going forward that Kirk Cousins came in and you were able to maybe win, 4 or 5 games at the end of the year and make it a little bit better, but that wasn't the guy that's going to be the core? Like, I just get worried. It's not a good look. And I think when you talk about teams being inconsistent in how they show up, a lot of that blame goes back to the head coach. And I get nervous for him going into the end of this season. Like you just said, there's a bunch of teams that, depend on how they play, you could probably circle Atlanta and put them at the top of that list for teams that need to play well for their head coach to stay.
Well, and when we think back to what happened in the 2024 offseason, they make the big investment in Kirk Cousins, and it allowed them to hide their intention to potentially draft Michael Penix Jr., which they did with the 8th overall pick, and it stunned everyone, and it was heavily criticized. You make a massive investment. It wasn't a placeholder quarterback. And then they say, oh, well, Kirk's going to be the quarterback for 3, 4, maybe 5 years, and we never believed that. And then it was after 14 regular season games last year that Cousins was benched for Penix. And they'd been looking for a way to offload that contract ever since. So they've committed to $100 million of Arthur Blank's money. And the guy that they drafted has not worked out. I remember after they beat the Bills on that Monday night game, Michael Penix Jr. said, we've arrived. And they proceeded to go the other direction since then. It just isn't working. And actually, Cousins playing down the stretch could make it worse, because it could cause Arthur Blank to say, why did we ever sign this guy in the first place? Cousins is a guy who musters a lot of his arm strength from the lower half of his body. It's not all flick of the wrist Aaron Rodgers stuff. And that base was messed up after he tore the Achilles tendon a couple of years ago, and he's never really gotten it back. And when you watch him play now, he's not the guy that he used to be. And that may make ownership say, we never should have signed him. And maybe we never should have drafted Michael Penix with the twice torn ACL. When something like this happens and a guy suffers a knee injury, I start hearing from people who are like, yeah, that's why we didn't have him on our board. Like, he had too many injuries in college. It's a tough, brutal, unforgiving sport. But it's one of the reasons why they bring everyone to Indianapolis and poke and prod them and study the medical records. They're trying to make a projection as to whether or not this person's body is suited to the physical demands of playing professional football. And if it just isn't, and you use the 8th overall pick on him, that's the kind of thing that causes owners to clean house. And I feel like, and I really like both Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot, but they have to know. They have to know that, it could be, they call it Black Monday. Hell, guys get fired the day of we saw it with Gerard Mayo last year. It was basically in the locker room after the game. It happens quickly. And with more teams already having vacancies like the Giants and the Titans, and there may be more, that creates an urgency to move even faster because those other teams are out there doing their due diligence, doing their search already. If you wait until the end of the season, you're behind the teams that didn't wait until the end of the season. So this isn't going to end well for the Falcons, and I have a feeling it's not going to end well for the head coach of the GM, and I think they're smart enough to realize it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing this year because I think the overwhelming feeling is these offensive-minded coaches, especially like in Atlanta where you have this young quarterback. I don't know, and I think you have a better pulse on this of who are the names of like these young offensive, whether it's coordinators or young offensive staff guys that teams are just like, man, I send that like the Ben Johnsons of the world, like because you look at Houston and DeMeco Ryans, I think is a really good head coach, but the problem continues to be, all right, what's the structure of the offense? How are they going to figure out the offense? You look at Mike Vrabel, very unique situation. He got an offensive coordinator that fell into what you just said, a guy who got 2 chances to be a head coach and it didn't work out. So now it's a good chance he's probably going to remain an offensive coordinator. So it's set. But I look at, Jeff Hafley, and I look at Campanelli, names that have come up for the Giants and different. Those are all defensive-minded guys. Raheem Morris is a defensive-minded guy. The offense has struggled. I just wonder, who are those names that teams aren't really rushing to get a head start?
There is no Ben Johnson this year, and I think it makes teams more compelled to look at other guys who have head coaching experience. And the one factor, I know we have to take a break, but the one factor that I continue to harp on this time of year that teams don't explore as much as they should, trying to identify other current head coaches whose teams may welcome a phone call and an opportunity to get some compensation and move on from a guy that they're already thinking about moving on from. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.